Good afternoon and welcome to another anti-money laundering talk show podcast with me, Stephen Platt. Today we're going to be talking to a dear friend of mine and one of the world's preeminent anti-money laundering experts, Bob Major. Bob is one of a handful of people who, as an undercover agent, has laundered money for Colombian and Mexican drug cartels. Most people simply read about money laundering typologies in textbooks, whereas Bob has lived the life of a professional money launderer, trusted over a number of years by some of the most dangerous people on earth. His latest book, The Betrayal, tells the story of Bob's subsequent undercover assignment in Operation Promo, in which, as Robert Baldassare, an Italian-American businessman originally from New York, he controlled an investment company and a mortgage brokerage business, laundering for the highly dangerous Cali drug cartel. Bob, thanks for joining us again. It's been a couple of years, I think, since you were last on the show. I know you're an exceptionally busy man, much in demand. Thanks for joining us again. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fine, and it's an honor to be invited.
Oh, it's kind of you to say so. Bob, the latest book, which I've read, obviously, is a real page turner. It had me on the edge of my seat, even though I already knew the story from our discussions. For the benefit of our listeners and without, as it were, sort of demotivating them from buying it, because they really should. Would you mind giving us a sort of a quick summation of the story and the background?
No, sure. At the conclusion of the undercover operation portrayed in The Infiltrator, as a lawyer, you well know that's when the work really starts. So for 2 years, I prepared for trials and testified in trials, and in the course of convicting the BCCI officers, got the opportunity to debrief them. And I was, up until that point, assuming that the BCCI affair was an anomaly. But as I began to spend months with them in the course of debriefing and with the records before us, because we had done search warrants at their branches, it became pretty obvious to me that their claim that they weren't doing anything different than a certain segment of the international banking and business community was doing was a reality. That compelled me to really want to go back into the underworld, to try to help the rest of the world understand this phenomenon that causes a segment of the international banking and business community to enrich themselves and to become an asset for these lethal organizations all over the world, and not just for drug traffickers and illegal arms dealers, people pilfering treasuries, tax evaders, dictators who are pilfering their nation's assets. There is a group of people who do that on a regular basis. And it was very easy for me to identify some of them, because once I was accepted into the underworld in a false ID with false companies, with support from informants, and I must say, agents behind the scenes who deserve tremendous credit for the success that we saw in both of these operations. It was startling to me to see, and quite easy for me to identify those people within the underworld who provide these services, pillars of the community to the rest of us outwardly. So when the Drug Enforcement Administration offered me an opportunity to transfer over to that agency for the purpose of becoming a long-term undercover agent in another probe similar to the one portrayed in The Infiltrator, I jumped at that opportunity. Getting into the Cali cartel, I have to confess, it was really just my acquiring another tool of believability so that I could deal within that corrupt portion of the international banking and business community that services the underworld. So they became kind of a passive reinforcement to those people who wondered whether I really was the bad guy who I purported to be or whether I was an undercover agent. The operation went just unbelievably great. For the first 4 months or so, I quickly became someone dealing with people who were in turn directly dealing with the leaders of the Cali cartel. I was dealing with direct reports who were the most important money launderers that were servicing the cartel. But as time went on, I began to recognize that certain people were beginning to withdraw, raise questions about me, and in my gut, it occurred that this was because there was corruption within my own organization. And ultimately, that became the truth. Little did I know at times when I was working undercover in Panama and in Colombia, there was a few people within the Cali cartel who knew I was a DEA undercover agent. I came very, very close to being killed. And as I wrote this book, the superficial betrayal is really the betrayal by someone who purported to be a friend and a colleague, while they were recklessly providing information that they knew darn well was likely to result in my death. At that time, when I was working undercover in Colombia, Pablo Escobar was offering $300,000 for the head of any DEA agent. And so it was a very, very risky time. But as I started to write this book more and more, I saw the different levels of betrayal. I think that there's a betrayal within, unfortunately, the pillars of the community who should be the gatekeepers to report these types of transactions. And I saw a betrayal, I feel, within the law enforcement community of doing, as some attribute to Albert Einstein, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. It was a definition of insanity, and it is, because we do the same thing over and over again. And the harsh reality is these criminal organizations are larger than ever. There's more drugs on the street than ever, and there's more money laundering going on than ever. And so we need to look in the mirror and face the facts and try to see how we can recalibrate this. And so I offer some ideas within the betrayal about that. But Stephen, you know my family. And the ultimate betrayal that I recognized as I was writing this book was my betrayal to the people I love the most, who I walked away from for an idealistic goal that has been a burden for everyone in my family. And I live every day trying to do what I can do to help heal that wound.
After Operation Sea Chase, where you'd been undercover for a number of years, laundering ultimately for Escobar, a very significant bounty was put on your life, and yet you chose to go undercover again in Operation Promo, laundering for the Cali cartel. There are a number of different ways in which you can make a difference. Going undercover is one of them. Why did you choose to put yourself at such enormous personal risk for a second time? I mean, I think a lot of people would think that is extraordinary, that you had survived Operation Sea Chase, and despite that, you rolled the dice again. What was it? Why, Bob? I mean, it's an amazing story.
Stephen, unless you are with me and crawl through this portal of the real world into the underworld at such a level where you see the massive corruption, the massive trafficking, the massive laundering, the control of countries, the control of presidents of countries, the control of militaries and judicial systems, and the theft of the rule of law in so many nations. I had this thought that I had learned so much from that first operation that I was uniquely armed to take advantage of this second opportunity that could be a real difference maker. And one of the things that I came to realize in the course of writing books is that as an undercover agent, I definitely I definitely had flaws. One of my flaws was this belief, and I can only guess this because although in the military, I wasn't on a battlefield with bullets coming my way. But if you are in that position, you are so laser focused on your goal that everything else in your life must be put aside. So in order to achieve the goal, and in order to stay alive and to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish, if what I had to do would cause me ultimately later to lose even my career, that was a cost of the mission, because the mission was everything. And if I had to do certain things at that moment, I felt this way. I never will ever feel this way again. But at the moment, I felt if I have to do certain things and it causes me to lose the bond with my family, then that's a cost of the mission, because the mission is the most important thing. And it would be the last thing that I would ever entertain. But if I had to lose my life in order to further the mission, I had myself convinced that that was just a casualty of the mission. And there is nothing more important than the mission. I basically became a person who was addicted to information. I had to get that critical thing. I mean, keep in mind, the wake of the infiltrator, I was dealing with people who would give me information and we'd seize a ton of cocaine. I would be with people and I would get information about where Manuel Noriega's illicit fortune was. I would be in a room and I would learn about 3 bank chains in the United States the rest of the world thought was owned by U.S. citizens, when in fact they were controlled by a foreign group very much involved with the intelligence community in the Middle East. These were things that were massive, massive crimes. And this was going to be an opportunity to crawl back into that world and to help the rest of the world see how unfortunate the truth is.
For those of you listening, I can highly recommend Bob's book, The Betrayal, not only, as I say, as an entertaining page turner, but also as an education in real life money laundering methodologies. There really is a lot to be gained from it for AML professionals. Similarly, there is a lot to be gained from engaging Bob to speak at internal training or awareness raising events. He is one of the most engaging speakers I've ever had the pleasure of listening to, and I know that there are really very few people in the world who know more about contemporary money laundering methodologies and the corresponding vulnerabilities of financial services than Bob. And Bob can be contacted at robertmazier.com. For now, thank you very much for listening. Stay safe and keep up the good fight. Thank you.